Hi, it's Jim. Before we get into today's episode, I want to tell you about another fantastic podcast, CDW Canada Tech Talks. If you're passionate about technology and innovation, this is a podcast for you. Join host KJ Burke as he and industry experts dive into the latest trends, insights, and strategies shaping the tech landscape in Canada. From hybrid cloud to AI adoption, CDW Canada Tech Talks covers it all. Don't miss out. Visit cdw.ca/tech talks to tune in today. The link is in the show notes. And KJ is actually my guest on #trending this weekend if you want to check that out on the weekend edition. Now, back to our regularly scheduled programming. The National Vulnerability Database is facing a huge backlog. 2 major Linux vulnerabilities this week. Meta's Ray-Ban smart glasses present a real risk of doxing, update on new vulnerabilities, and more information on the CIRA study on ransomware. This is Cybersecurity Today. I'm your host, Jim Love. The National Institute of Standards and Technology, or NIST, is facing a significant backlog in its National Vulnerability Database. For context, the NVD, as it's known, is a central repository that catalogs known software vulnerabilities. It provides essential details like severity scores, affected products, and mitigation strategies. And this database is a vital resource for organizations worldwide to stay informed about security threats and protect their systems. Over 17,000 security flaws remain unprocessed, despite NIST's self-imposed deadline to clear the backlog by September 30th. Patrick Garrity from VulnCheck reports that more than 72% of new vulnerabilities since February are still awaiting analysis. Now, this delay impacts organizations who rely on the NVD for timely updates on security threats. Organizations are losing visibility into assets, especially those with newer vulnerabilities. Garrity told the publication The Register that organizations are losing visibility into assets, especially those with newer vulnerabilities. There's a high likelihood that organizations don't have visibility into assets that are known to be exploited. The NVD's role is vital in aggregating vulnerability information and aiding in risk assessment. Delays mean that critical vulnerabilities might not reach those who need to know in time, and again, it increases the risk of exploitation. Experts warn that this backlog increases risks to an already challenging cybersecurity landscape, and there's a call for action to NIST and the broader community to address this issue promptly. Cybersecurity researchers at Aquanautilus have discovered a sophisticated malware called Perfctl, PERFCTL, that's been silently infiltrating Linux servers across the globe. Exploiting over 20,000 misconfigurations, this malware could potentially affect millions of systems. Perfctl was detected when it attacked a Nautilus honeypot, allowing researchers to study it closely. This malware is highly persistent and evasive, using rootkits and advanced techniques to hide from standard system tools and monitoring processes. Intriguingly, it temporarily suspends its activities when new users log in, making it even harder to detect. Asaf Morag, a researcher at Aquanautilus, stated, "We strongly believe the attackers targeted millions worldwide with a potential number of victims in the thousands. It appears that with this malware, any Linux server could be at risk." The malware begins its attack by downloading a payload from an attacker-controlled server named HTTPD. It then replicates itself across multiple locations, disguising itself with file names that mimic legitimate system files. Its main objective is crypto mining, draining system resources to generate cryptocurrency. But it's also been observed hijacking servers for other malicious purposes and attempting to exploit known vulnerabilities like CVE 2021-4043 to gain root access. Developers have reported unexplained system slowdowns on forums like Reddit and Stack Overflow, but until now, there were no official analyses of this threat. Another critical vulnerability was discovered this week in the Common Unix Printing System, or CUPS, which could affect a wide range of Linux and Unix-based systems. Software developer Simone Margaritelli has uncovered multiple vulnerabilities in CUPS that could allow remote attackers to execute arbitrary commands on vulnerable machines. They're identified as CVE 2024-47176 and related CVEs, and these flaws exploit weaknesses in CUPS and its associated libraries. An attacker can send a specifically crafted packet to UDP port 631, the port used by CUPS for network printing. This could trick the system into reaching out to an attacker-controlled server, ultimately leading to the execution of a malicious code when a user starts a print job. Margaritelli recommends immediate action, disabling or removing the CUPS browsed service, updating your CUPS installation when patches are available, and maybe even consider blocking access to UDP port 631. If you don't use printing services, removing CUPS entirely might also mitigate the risk. Recently, there was a revealing demonstration by 2 Harvard students that exposes serious privacy concerns with augmented reality technology. 2 students have developed a project called Eye X-ray showing how Meta's Ray-Ban smart glasses can be used to dox people in real time. By utilizing the glasses live stream feature to Instagram, a computer program monitors the video feed and uses AI to recognize faces. These images are then cross-referenced with the public databases like PimEyes to retrieve personal information, names, addresses, phone numbers, and even relatives. In their demo, the students identified classmates and approached strangers on public transit, engaging them as if they were acquaintances based on the data they'd gathered. They stated, "The purpose of building this tool is not for misuse, and we are not releasing it. Their aim is to raise awareness that such privacy invasions are possible with existing technology." Meta's smart glasses have a privacy light to indicate recording, but it's often difficult to notice. So while Meta advises users to respect others' privacy, not everyone may follow these guidelines. This demonstration serves as a warning of the potential misuse of consumer AR devices and underscores the need for robust regulations and ethical standards. 2 quick announcements of some critical vulnerabilities. 1, security researchers have identified a new remote code execution vulnerability in Zimbra email servers. It's tracked as CVE 2024-45519. Hackers are exploiting this flaw by sending specially crafted emails to the server's SMTP service, and the vulnerability exists in Zimbra's post-journal service, which processes incoming emails. So by inserting malicious code into the CC field of the email, attackers can execute commands on the server when the email is processed. Researchers observed mass exploitation attempts starting on September 28th, with attackers sending spoofed emails that appear to come from legitimate sources. Administrators are urged to apply the latest patches and review their systems for signs of compromise. In another concerning development, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, or CISA, has issued a warning about a critical vulnerability in Ivanti Endpoint Manager, known as CVE 2024-29824. The SQL injection flaw allows unauthenticated attackers within the same network to execute arbitrary code on unpatched systems. Despite Ivanti releasing security updates in May and a proof of concept exploit being published in June, attackers are now actively exploiting this vulnerability. Organizations who are using Ivanti Endpoint Manager are strongly advised to update their systems immediately and monitor for any suspicious activity. And finally, an update on the story we ran on Wednesday, where we talked about the Canadian Internet Registry Authority, CIRA's annual cybersecurity study. We noted that an amazing number of respondents, more than 70%, reported that they had paid ransoms. We wanted to validate that finding with someone from CIRA, and I was able to chat with John Ferguson, the Vice President of Cybersecurity and DNS at CIRA. Here's what he had to say.
Every year, we send out a survey to over 500 professionals. It's based on a random sampling across the segments that we serve, which is traditionally the municipality, university, schools, hospitals, healthcare. And this year, we got more private sector respondents than we have in previous years. Still predominantly public sector and what we call lovingly the mush sector. It is a random survey of professionals in this tech sector. It's not necessarily surprising, Jim, that the percentage is higher. I think the reality is we're seeing a a shift in attitudes where people are prepared to talk about this more than we have in the past. It's certainly something we've been seeing in a lot of communities. People are trying to sunlight the issue a little bit to give people resources and experience to learn from.
Which goes back to that idea, although a much higher percentage paid the ransom, a very high percentage want it to be illegal.
Over 70% of people surveyed indicated that they support regulations that would ban paying ransoms. I think it's pretty telling that there's so many that are paying, but they're saying, I don't want to pay that, or I know it's a bad idea. Center for Cybersecurity here in Canada and the NC3 group, higher government organizations that look at national trends and issues all recommend the same thing. Don't pay the ransom. It's a standpoint we advocate to our communities as well, because you just put a target on your back. If you pay once, that means you're maybe willing to pay twice. There's never a guarantee that paying the ransom doesn't prevent you from getting hit again.
A lot of surveys show that people who do get hit and pay get hit again, and not everyone gets their data back.
That's the truth. Paying the ransom is no guarantee. One of the key stats in that survey as well is just that the difference between recovery times when you talk about the IT system. So most organizations are surveyed here are citing less than a week to recover the IT systems, but a month or longer to actually recover the data in those systems. It's an interesting situation where we're seeing recovery time of infrastructure coming up much quicker, but reinstating services still has a longer window. And I think until we get to the point where restoring data, restoring the actual business is really, really short, then for some organizations, paying the ransomware may still be perceived as a quicker path to getting business back and flowing.
So, John, anything else that leapt out to you in the survey that I missed?
I think a lot of the key points we already talked about are there. Certainly the key one that's out there. You can't talk about cybersecurity today, Jim, without talking about AI. And what you see in the survey, over 70% of respondents are saying that AI is one of the biggest things keeping them awake, one of the biggest risks to their organization. Mainly that being driven by all of the deep fakes, the speed at which the attacks now come because of this automation. But they're well under 50% of the organizations indicating that they actually have an AI policy themselves. So what we're seeing here, I think, is maybe a real traditional adoption curve. You got some early adopters who are willing to risk a lot of things, i.e. the bad folks who, what's the worst case scenario for them? If my cyber attack fails, nobody really knows. The folks trying to use AI for defense are lagging in that adoption and understanding because they've got bigger risks. They've got bigger liabilities. They're trying to figure out how to use AI tools to defend. I think we're seeing a lot of really key wins that are starting to come in the automation world. All these survey data points are kind of interesting to pick at. I look at the one that also indicates that most organizations have added staff in cybersecurity. But as you dig one layer deeper and talk to more of our partners and customers, they're shifting the types of roles and responsibilities that those folks are taking over. So rather than clicking there through event logs and alarms and alerts, I want to use the AI. I want to use the machine learning to do that. And I want to move my human power up the chain to response and actionable intelligence. And I think if those two things can come to fruition, it's a real opportunity for us to get better at defending.
And that's our show for today. Thanks to our sponsors, CDW and KJ Burke's CDW Canada Tech Talks. Check it out if you get the chance. You can find them on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. And you can find links to the reports and other details in our show notes at technewsday.ca or .com. Take your pick. We welcome your comments, tips, and the occasional bit of constructive criticism at editorial@technewsday.ca. Just a reminder that this weekend, we have a new feature where we're going to be looking at some emerging research, this time with my friend and co-host, David Shipley. David's going to give our listeners a preview of some research that won't be released until January, so you get your sneak preview here with us on Cybersecurity Today, the weekend. It'll be released early in the morning and there in time for your Saturday coffee. This is Cybersecurity Today. I'm your host, Jim Love. Thanks for listening.